you're muted.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Still have a few people joining. We'll continue to let people into the session while we're recording and starting. So today we're here to talk about the fiscal year 2024 Crime Victim Assistance Grant Program announcement. I'm going to be starting the presentation. I'm Brenda Johns. I am the Victim Services Program Coordinator at ACJC. And halfway through the presentation, Heather Bonet, who's the Victim Services Program Administrator, will come on and do her portion of the presentation. We are going to ask that you hold all your questions until the end if you want to ask them. If you want to type them, you can add them into the chat. We will address all questions at the end of the presentation, as this is being recorded, and we want to make sure anyone who is watching it later can watch it from beginning to end as a full presentation, and address all the questions at the end as part of a Q&A. Okay, so if you come up with something you might forget, put it in the chat. Otherwise, hold your questions till the end. In order to ask questions at the end, we will ask that you unmute yourself. We're not going to put everybody on mute at this point, but if we have to, you would have to unmute yourself in order to access the sound again. We cannot unmute you. Let's see. So we're going to speak today about the FY2024 Victim Assistance Grant. This grant is authorized based upon ARS 41-2407, which allows ACJC to use crime victim assistance funds through a competitive grant process. This year, we anticipate the total amount of all projects total together will be $750,000 at this point in time. We anticipate a maximum dollar amount of any individual award to be about $75,000. The performance period is from July 1st of 2023 until June 30th of 2024, and it is for expenses incurred during that period of time. So even though you may make a payment on an expense in July, if it was incurred prior to July, it would not be part of this project. So be aware, do not start your project until July 1st. If you are approved. Grant funds must be used to support projects providing victim assistance services directly to crime victims, or to provide training to paid or volunteer staff of agencies providing services directly benefiting crime victims. You will be receiving the grant announcement next week. I will send it out to everybody who is in attendance here. It will also be available on our website. Please make sure you review the grant announcement for detailed information on allowable costs, restrictions, scoring, and the award process. Some important dates for you to be aware of. Monday, January 30th is when this grant opens. We can answer questions related to grant application up until that point in time. After that, we will be limited to answering questions related to technical difficulties or technical assistance with the grant system itself. The deadline for submission is Friday, March 10th, 2023 by 3 p.m. The allowable costs under this grant include crisis intervention, emergency services, support services, court-related services, notification services, training for paid or volunteer staff of agencies who provide direct services to victims, and it must produce education or if you produce education or outreach materials describing services available, how to obtain project assistance, and volunteer opportunities. There are some restrictions on the use of the funds. Crime prevention efforts other than those aimed at providing specific services addressing victimization are prohibited. General public relations programs cannot be paid for. Advocacy for a particular legislative or administrative reform is prohibited. General criminal justice agency improvement is not something that is covered under this grant. and a project in which victims are not the primary beneficiaries, or a project which is not directly addressing victimization. Let's see. Matching funds are required for this program. A match of 20% of the total grant award is required. All match sources must not expire prior to June 30th, 2024. The announcement explains how to calculate your match. You will need to make sure that you pull up the announcement when you are calculating match. The match calculator in the application, although it does work, is difficult. So if you use the calculation process that is indicated in the announcement, you will arrive at your match very quickly. There are some reporting requirements for this grant. You are required to submit monthly financial reports and an annual performance report to ACJC. And these reports do require backup documentation for the financial reports. You must submit one copy of the most recently completed financial audit, and this must be submitted with your application. If you do not have to complete a financial audit for your agency, then you need to provide some type of documentation indicating that that is not a requirement for you. You must allow the commission or its duly authorized representatives access to and the rights to examine any books, documents, papers, records, or other evidence of activities conducted pursuant to the awards. Do you want me to do the next one, Heather? And the method of payment for this grant is a reimbursement. Financial reimbursement requests do require supporting documentation for all expenditures charged to the grant. The list of documentation required is found in the grant announcement. It is important to note that failure to provide all of the documentation necessary at the time of the request for reimbursement will result in a delay in payment.
All right, so I'm going to continue just with some additional special requirements that would be required if you are funded under our program. One of those is to complete a sub-awardee questionnaire within 45 days of the start of the grant award. As a grantee, if awarded, you would also be required to complete any civil rights training to ensure compliance with all federal and state civil rights laws within 90 days of award acceptance. And this information would also be in your grant agreement if awarded. Next slide. Also, just to let everyone know, we do, as an agency, utilize DocuSign to execute all grant agreements. It is an electronic service that utilizes an electronic signature for processing of our grant agreements. So we do utilize DocuSign. We do not accept a paper executed grant agreement. By utilizing this service, it expedites the execution of that. So we do utilize DocuSign. I'm going to go through a little bit of the scoring process so you guys understand what to expect when you submit an application. Each grant application will be scored by a team of qualified individuals. Each grant application is evaluated according to the Crime Victim Assistance Program rules. Brenda mentioned the program rules earlier. We will attach a copy of the program rules to the application so you will have access to those as well. When it comes to the award proposal, the proposed award amount will be based on the amount requested and the results of the scored application. Commission staff will propose an allocation plan first to the Crime Victims Committee of the Commission for review. The committee will then make a recommendation to the full Arizona Criminal Justice Commission for final action in May. To touch on the timeline, as Dorinda mentioned, the grant opens, the solicitation opens on January 30th, that's Monday. The application closes on March 10th, that's Friday, and the application does close by 3 p.m. So if you try to submit your application at 3 p.m., the system actually closes down at that point. You would no longer be able to submit an application. So our recommendation is definitely submit earlier than that in case you experience any technical difficulties because the system does shut down at 3 p.m. We anticipate the review team meeting for all of the scores that are reviewing applications to take place on April 13th. We anticipate the Crime Victims Committee meeting will be roughly May 10th, with the full commission meeting receiving that proposed recommendation from the committee on May 18th. Those dates may be subject to change. We will provide notice of the victims committee meeting as well as the commission meeting for all applications that are submitted. We anticipate that all grant agreements will be sent to those funded recipients by June 2nd, and the project obviously starts July 1st of 2023, and the project end date for this grant would be June 30th of 2024. Some scoring considerations for you guys to take note of. First is submitting a complete and accurate application ahead of the deadline. Making sure that your application is providing assistance to victims in filing crime victim compensation. That your project is effectively using volunteers and assisting with victim services. As an applicant, that you have a problem statement that identifies the need for services in your community, which is supported by statistical data. That your program addresses the problem in the community, the eligibility of services proposed by your application. So that is a reminder that your project must be eligible under the victim services, the Victim Assistance Grant Program rules. Another one to consider is that your program coordinates efforts with other public and private agencies. That your program goals and outcomes are appropriate, achievable, and measurable. That your budget is reasonable and allowable. That your matching funds are clearly identified. That you have clearly defined data collection methodologies and an evaluation plan. And you show program performance history. When it comes to the scorecard, there is a detailed scorecard included in the announcement. So we'll provide a little bit more detail on the score considerations I just touched on. And for the scores, there are 1,000 points possible on that scorecard. When it comes to the application, all applications for the FY2024 grant will be submitted using the ACJC grants portal. We've provided the web address below. When you go to the web address, we do provide detailed instructions for the application within that application. There's also additional information in a manuals section. So if you need any computer-based training on utilizing the ACJC grants portal, those are all provided under that manual section. As far as the announcement and any additional information for the announcement, that can be found at our website under the grants section. We've included that web page below. This PowerPoint will also be on that grants available page, as well as the announcement and any additional materials, and those will be available when the grant opens on Monday. We've also recently completed a Grants 101 training as a web training, so I provided the link for that computer-based Grants 101 training, so you have access to that as well. My recommendation for anybody who has not used our grants portal is to log in as soon as possible. If you have not utilized our portal before, you will need to create an account or register for an account. So I would recommend that you do that as soon as possible if you have not accessed our portal before. And with that, that's just a high-level overview of the Victim Assistance Grant Program. We've included our information, both myself and Dorinda, on this website. Or on the slide deck, as well as the ACJC website. And with that, we are open to any questions that you may have.
Hi, this is Linda Young from Navajo County. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So obviously with the anticipated reductions in the VOCA funding from DPS, is the intention that we could apply for the same services that DPS funds as well? Is that what this grant's going to cover?
Yes. So as long as your project is eligible under our program rules, which VOCA projects, historically, they are covered under our program rules, you could submit that as a project under our grant funding. Historically, we have had priorities that have prioritized grant projects that were not eligible for VOCA funding, but that was not a priority that was approved by the commission. So currently the priorities of projects are those projects that are eligible under the Victim Assistance Program rules.
Okay.
There are two questions, Heather. The first is, actually now there's three. The first is, How does this current grant amount available compare to last year's funding?
This current fiscal year, we were able to award $500,000 in grant funding. So the FY 2024 anticipated amount of $750,000 is a significant increase to our current FY 23 funding.
And the next one is, with the projected reductions in VOCA funding, is it allowable to request funds to cover those previously funded activities under VOCA?
What we would, you would submit that as a project. So we wouldn't identify that you're submitting a VOCA project. You would just simply submit the project that you're requesting ACJC funding for.
The next one, is there going to be a cap?
There is a projected cap. So we anticipate approximately $750,000 in looking at the fund revenues and projected revenues into the fund. That's what we anticipate we will be able to grant out. And there will be a maximum award cap. We anticipate that to be $75,000. That doesn't mean that we will award the maximum to every project, but we will not submit a proposal higher than the proposed maximum of $75,000 per project.
The next question is, will this grant cover salary of supervisory staff or only frontline staff?
In that we do, in the program rules, we give specific examples under those priorities that we talked about earlier. You would just have to ensure that your project staff qualify under those specific victim assistance program rules. And Dorina, you can go back to that slide if you have that, the allowable costs.
Yeah, I'm going back there right now.
And with each of those, under those categories, so crisis intervention, emergency services, support services, the program rules go into significant detail on exactly what those are. So you can refer to that and that'll help you out. And that will also be in the announcement.
Is there a renewal year after year one?
There is not. We run a competitive grant application every fiscal year with that grant starting July 1st and ending June 30th.
And the last question is, I will answer it. Will we get access to this PowerPoint? Yes. You will get access to the recording and the PowerPoint. The PowerPoint will be available in the solicitation email that goes out. It will be available on the website, and it will be available in the grant application itself. Then can we add our grant writer to the grants portal? Each individual can create their own profile in the grants portal. So each individual can register, and that's how they get added to the portal itself. And then for purposes of application, you want one application per agency. So in the case of a grant writer, that would be your application. No one else would be able to see that application except the grant writer. Once you are, if you receive funding, then everyone will have access to the application, and the specified individuals on the grant will have access to the ongoing grant. The next question is, would advocacy services be considered support services?
So in our program rules, we define support services such as assistance dealing with effects of victimization, assistance dealing with other social services and criminal justice agencies, assistance in replacing or obtaining the return of property kept as evidence, assistance in dealing with the victim's landlord or employer, and referral to other sources of assistance as needed. So if you are an advocate that provides that assistance, that could be a potential project where you are requesting, I'm assuming you would be requesting the personnel cost related to that advocate service.
There are no additional questions at this point. Does anybody want to ask a question? Unmute yourself and ask it, or put it in the chat. So we'll stay on for a few more minutes to answer any questions you might have. Denise?
Sorry, Dorinda. So with NACASA services, would those fall under, and I'll look at the reading of the document as well, but emergency services, crisis intervention?
It would fall under one of those services most likely. You'll just need to look at the specific definitions there. You already fell under it under your prior applications, because these are the same administrative rules that were used to develop the prior year's programs.
I will make sure that I just read through the document and our previous application.
Okay, the next question is from let's start off with Linda. Go ahead, Linda.
Specifically, we have a forensic interviewer, and VOCA historically has not funded this position because the interpretation was that it was more of an evidence gathering function. However, this specific resource and this specific job is also referral services, follow-up contact, that type of thing. So I wasn't sure what your thoughts on that were.
So when you have a position that has, Linda, can you mute yourself again? Because I'm getting feedback. Okay. So when you have a position that has multiple pieces to it, multiple roles, some of which do not fall within our rules, so you'd have to look at our specific rules, then you could apply still for the portions of the position that are covered under our rules, but you would need to make sure that you clearly identify the percentage of time spent on those areas, and that way we could identify then how much of what you're asking for is actually covered. So if you have somebody who is spending 90% of their time on something that isn't covered and 10% of their time on something that is, then if you give us the entire salary and say only 10% of it is what you're asking for, then we could potentially cover that. And we would be asking you to provide information to us in statistics based upon your project which would be the 10% of the time, for example. But we do have some differences between what VOCA covers and what we cover, and that was evident when we had the non-VOCA eligible projects, which is why I do recommend that you really read the administrative rules in detail, because oftentimes we have a broader definition than DPS VOCA did or does.
And I will say, since we've read through support service examples, I'll just read through the other ones so you guys are aware. Again, this is all in the announcement, and we reference the program rules, so you guys will have access to those as well. So like we said, eligible services to receive funding may include crisis intervention, which are services to meet the urgent emotional or physical needs of a victim. Crisis intervention services may include a 24-hour hotline for counseling or referrals. For emergency services, that would be such as temporary shelter for a victim who cannot safely remain in current lodgings, emergency financial assistance for immediate needs related to transportation, food, shelter, and other necessities, and temporary repairs to doors, locks, and windows damaged as a result of crime to prevent further victimization. For court-related services, direct services, or financial assistance that helps a victim participate in criminal justice proceedings, such as childcare, meals, and parking expenses, and advocate services such as escorting a victim to a criminal justice-related interview, court proceedings, and assistance in accessing temporary protection services. And then for notification services, it's those that are found in ARS Title 13, Chapter 40, Crime Victims' Rights, training or paid or volunteer staff of agencies who provide services directly benefiting victims, and to produce the educational outreach materials that we have right there. Some examples of projects that we have seen prior to, we have seen victim advocates, we have seen sexual assault nurse examiners, we've seen on-call time for those direct service positions, we have seen training projects. Dorina, do you have like another, just kind of list of things that we funded prior to?
Yes, we have funded both legal advocates and on-scene funded. Wow. Something just happened. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, my screens just went like weirdly blank. So I'm hoping you guys now they're doing flickering. All right. So we have funded also some legal advocates out of law offices that work with victims on victims' rights. We have funded victims' rights projects in the past. We have funded services through like the coalition with funding some of the trainings that they produce. We currently fund trainings for specific agencies to provide to their agency, and also trainings for ACVS to provide to advocates. We have funded new projects, brand new, spanking new agencies, that new nonprofits that need assistance. For example, we had a family advocacy center that had been in business for less than a year, coming to us to ask for some funding on some of the positions so that they could continue to stay in business until they could qualify potentially for VOCA. We've also funded a number of, I think I just lost my thought. A number of agencies that provided other direct support, such as nutrition. We funded a cook at a shelter because they were providing direct meals to the individuals at the shelter. We have funded a nutritionist who is working at a shelter. What else have we funded at the shelters, Heather? You can think?
That's all I can think of right now.
We funded bed nights at hotels for emergency services there. We have funded emergency services in general, the cost of those services. For example, if you want to like car repairs to allow somebody, a victim, to be able to use their car to get to safety, we have funded emergency glasses replacement and things of that nature. The variety of projects is pretty big. So if you think it fits within the rules, then apply for it, and we will look at it to determine. It might be only a portion of it is, and maybe we could only award a portion, but it might be that the entire project could be eligible. Oh, we funded cameras for sexual assault nurse exams before, and a camera for the forensic exams for when somebody has been strangled.
Elvira, I see hand raised.
Elvira, are you there? You're muted.
I think my question was answered when Linda Young asked her question about having a support staff that does court-related services, notification services, but also works partly as a legal assistant. So I think she answered that, how to approach that.
Okay, great. Is counseling something that is funded? Yes, counseling is something that can be funded. As long as it's directly with the victim, we're good with that.
Yeah, and we would see that under support services.
Hi, Dorinda. This is Janice. Can you hear
Hello.
me?
Yes.
Hi. So I just want to make sure that notification advocates are included in this.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Annette.
Our regular victim compensation grant that we get every year.
Actually, victim compensation is covered under the victim compensation program. That's where the administrative costs for that are held. And so, Annette, that is the reason why we asked you through the victim compensation program to supply us with information on your current administrative costs so we can evaluate what adjustments may need to be made to administrative dollars for the victim compensation program, as that's included in a separate grant.
Okay, thank you.
And I know folks may have questions. We are very aware of the fiscal challenges that the VOCA fund is facing. You know, and unfortunately with that, you know, just kind of keep in mind that, you know, like we said before, we do have, you know, only approximately $750,000 available for all grants. And we do have that approximate maximum award amount. And so the reviewers will be reviewing all requested items, you know, looking and make sure those budgets are reasonable under those cost requests. So just keep that in mind when you guys are submitting and reviewing your applications. Any other questions?
So I do have another question.
Okay.
So is this going to be in addition to our normal ACJC grant, or is this going to be an additional?
So this is the competitive grant for the victim assistance projects. If you are talking victim compensation, that's through a completely separate process. You would not submit a competitive application for anything related to your victim compensation dollars that you would receive as one of our operational units, Elvira.
Okay.
There is another question in the queue. Will preference be given to current grantees?
There was no preference or priorities given. However, performance evaluation and performance score is a scored item on the application. So as part of that, we will be reviewing performance history of a grantee as a scored requirement. If you are a new grantee and you may not have performance history or an administrative history with ACJC, you are able to submit proof of prior performance in order to fulfill that score requirement.
Any additional questions? Okay, again, we will stay on for another few minutes. You are welcome to stay on and talk with us. We are available to answer questions through the date that this starts, which is on Monday. And so if you wish to ask questions, your best way to get a hold of us after this until Monday is to send us an email. I would not send us an email on the weekend because most likely we will not see it until Monday when we can no longer answer your questions. So get your questions in through email to us today or tomorrow well before 5 so that we can get you answers.
Hey, Dorinda, one quick question before you sign off. Totally different subject.
Okay.
About the victim compensation rules survey.
Let's talk about that offline because we're still recording.
Yeah. I'll call you, Elvira, okay?
Okay.
Anything else for victim assistance? All right, thank you guys for attending the meeting today. As we said, it will open on Monday. All the information will be on our website once that opens on Monday, as well as our grants page. So check all of that out if you have not before. And we will be available for the next couple of days for questions. And we look forward to seeing everyone's applications and your projects. Thank you and have a great afternoon.